Thank you for joining us this morning for our city council work session. We'll go ahead and get started. Shawnee, good morning. Could you please call the roll?
Cheatham,
Here.
Blurick,
Here.
Mangum,
Here.
Mansfield,
Here.
Nichols,
Here.
Paulson,
Here.
Glad.
Here. Thank you. They always change it up on me here. I never know who's going to be calling the roll over there, so. We'll go to agenda item number 2 is Housing Alliance and Community Partners Update. Representatives from the Housing Alliance and Community Partners, HACP, will discuss their goals and projects as well as council's policies and expectations. Thank you.
She said no.
Michelle said, no, go ahead. You go ahead.
Everybody's fine to get up there. We don't blame you. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council.
As a reminder, would you just tell everybody at home your names, your titles, and you can even introduce the one that's supporting you if you wanted to.
Okay. My name is Jared Mangum. I'm the Executive Director. I was hired in April, so this is my first time at this event. And so, yeah.
I'm Kimberly Phillips. I'm the Deputy Director. I've been with the agency since May of 21.
And Michelle Pondbell back here, she is our new board chair. She was voted in last month as the new board chair.
And I've been on the board since July.
I don't know if it's congratulations or condolences, so we'll find out, I guess. That's good.
It's a great group.
Yes, it is. Super. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. If you want to just go through your presentation.
So I'm not sure how much or what has been presented in the past, but basically I've just put together I'm going to give you a synopsis if you have any specific questions. But basically our agency was founded in 1968. We covered just the Pocatello and Chubbuck area, so we're the HUD representative for the area. Our board is appointed by the mayor, and our board meets monthly. Just as a kind of a snapshot of our agency, we have public housing, which is Christensen Court, the building right next to city. That is 72 units. They are 62 and older and disabled. So those individuals have subsidies by HUD. They can have no income and still live there. HUD will subsidize the unit for them, or they can have a certain amount. They pay a percentage. They have a ROS coordinator that's under a grant through HUD, and that ROS coordinator is similar to like a caseworker. They help individuals make progress in their life. They help them resolve issues. So that's Pocatello's public housing. We have Portneuf Towers, which is on a different side of HUD. It's very similar to Christensen Court, but it does not have a ROS coordinator. And so it's not public housing, but it's on the multifamily side of HUD. Similar, they have subsidies, and those are usually single individuals that live there at Portneuf Towers. We do not own, but we manage Reflection 5 properties, which is owned by an owner in Utah. And we manage those properties. So they are El Rancho, Swisher, Stockman, Hawthorne, and Franklin. Those are the properties that we manage. And then there's one property in Rexburg that we manage as well that he owns. So those properties are for families, and they are HUD subsidized units. They are 1 to 4 bedrooms. And based on your family size or needs, you may qualify to be in one of those properties. Our resource center, which used to be the old car wash, people still call it that, but it's the resource center. We recently have made a lot of progress on that building. What we're doing is trying to bring resources to Christensen Court, our public housing, and also to make it a place where we can have multi different agencies come together and provide resources to the community. So currently we have a physical therapist, a wound specialist, and a home health, Eden Home Health and Hospice is there. And we're looking at bringing in some educational pieces. We've worked with NeighborWorks is working on some programs with us, and we're trying to get more agencies involved in the process. But that resource center is we're just kind of getting it going.
Yes.
Before we move too far, you talk about these privately owned properties that are for voucher and subsidization. Is there an opportunity for more management of privately owned properties?
Absolutely.
I just think that that's maybe valuable information because if property owners knew that, I think part of the complication, right? It's complicated to make sure that they're abiding by regulations and being a part of this program. And so I think knowing that you guys could help manage that would be a valuable piece of information.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what our agency has done in the past, but we are a property, we can manage properties. And if there are people out there that have private properties that want us to manage them, it would just involve us getting into a contract with them. So it's not something, I don't think our agency's necessarily done that in the past, but we are more than willing to take local properties in Pocatello and keep it Pocatello. That's our objective as the Pocatello authority. So that's what we would like to do. But that's a good point.
Councilmember Cheatham.
Is there a specific kind of property that would fall under your potential jurisdiction? Or I guess what is the process if somebody wants that?
So if it's a private entity, we also own open market. That's called open market. That is not a HUD subsidy. So there are lots of open market properties in Pocatello and anywhere you go. We have some of those. We own some open markets ourselves. We also have student housing, which is the Elms. We own that, and so we manage that as well. So it would just be that if someone owns it and they just wanted to allow us to manage it, we can manage it. If they're interested in us taking our vouchers and putting it there and making it a HUD subsidy, we could also look at doing that. We do have some of that, and that's something I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But there's a lot of options. So if there's someone that wants to do that, just look us up, come talk to me. My office is just right behind City Hall. We are open to anything we can help the community with.
Speaking of rentals, how's the market doing in Pocatello? I had heard it had gone up dramatically and it's beginning to adjust.
You know, it's not great. I think that and kind of I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but what we're seeing as the housing authority is that there's some individuals from outside the state that are buying properties in the area, and then they're increasing rates and doing things. I've gotten a few phone calls from concerned citizens saying that they don't know what to do. And there's not really much, we don't have any teeth to do anything, and I don't know that the city council has any teeth to do anything with private landlords, but we just direct them to the fair housing rules that landlords have to abide by. And that's really all we can do. I don't know, there is what's the free legal help?
Free legal aid.
Yeah, legal aid, that's it. So legal aid could also help them, but as far as landlords and the rates, I mean, it's a supply and demand issue. The demand is pretty high, and so the rates have gone up significantly. It's a challenge. I mean, there's a lot of people struggling. When we issue a voucher, we create a subsidy that HUD allows us to do, and then it has to meet the qualifications when they go out and try to find a place. And sometimes we're in negotiations with property managers to say, hey, that has to kind of fall in this range for it to work. And so we can negotiate with them and try to make it work. But any landlord in this area can take a voucher from us, and they can use that voucher as a subsidy. So say that the rent is at $1,000, and the person that has our voucher, it's based on their income, but they typically pay 30%. So let's say that they pay $300 and then HUD pays the $700. So we recently found out in our agency that HUD has a program that allows people to buy homes on the same principle. If they have a voucher, if we could get a bank to give them a loan, they could use that same voucher to purchase a home for themselves.
To make a portion of the payment?
Yeah, and HUD would pay the portion of the payment just like they would to a landlord. So that's something we're trying to get going. We've had one meeting with a bank. We can't really like push people to a bank, but we've had one meeting with WAFED, and we've asked them if they might be interested in doing that, and we're trying to get that program going, but we only have one person on that program out of all of our vouchers, and we have 500 and something vouchers. So we would really like to get that process going so that we can try to keep the properties local and try to help people that have vouchers get into homes.
Mr. Mayor, one more. Is there anything in that process that helps people with loan to value, that is down payments?
Not necessarily, but there are other programs in locally that other agencies have that do help with that. That's a good question. I'd have to do some research and try to come up with some solutions there, but I don't know. I mean, yeah.
NeighborWorks has their program.
NeighborWorks has a program. Yeah, we said that in unison, didn't we?
Yeah, NeighborWorks has a program that helps. And
Down payment assistance. And
Sika, that's right.
might
Sika
too.
also has a program. So.
Yeah.
I think at NeighborWorks, they have to attend a class.
Yeah,
It's a
they've
class
got
they
some
have to attend,
training
and then
that
they
they
get
would
a
like to do.
certification. And then I think it's kind of considered a second mortgage almost. And it's through Idaho Housing, generally,
Right.
is who the loan's through. But it's at a higher interest rate usually than your mortgage is. I know there's been talk of a new program where that loan would be, if you owned your home for a certain amount of time, they would
Forgive
forgive
it,
it.
yeah.
Forgive the down payment. too, so.
But maybe we could look into that and come back, or at least give maybe the city council some information on it. So,
That'd be good. Okay, so I've got a question by Council President Lurick, then Councilmember Nichols, then Councilmember Mango.
okay.
My question was really along the lines of Rick's last question. So I was saying, when HUD, if it's for a house, rather than to pay a portion of their rent, they only pay a portion or a percentage of their monthly payment, not
Yeah,
any
it would,
percentage of
it would
the
be,
down
say
payment.
like, for example, that the house payment was 1,000, I'm just giving you an example, it'd be the same thing, that they would pay 300, HUD would pay 700.
But no-
It's just going to the bank for themselves rather than a landlord.
No, I get that part. I'm asking, they don't pay any percentage of the down payment.
So that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure that, and that's what I need to look into is if, let's say that they might be responsible for the entire down payment. And so if that is, then we would have to look at other options to get over that hurdle. I'm not saying everyone, but there is sometimes issues right now with lending, right? I mean, you've got some pretty steep lending hurdles to get over with credit scores and all of that stuff. So, I mean, it's not impossible, but there is an option there. And if people could use the same program that they're paying a landlord but own their own home, that helps the city, it helps the voucher recipients.
And I was wondering, because they may well not meet a lot of those criteria, but if there was a way to sort of help them through that part of it, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why we need to have some discussions with banks or local, maybe even local banks or just bigger banks that would, it's a subsidy, so HUD's paying it and it's pretty much guaranteed. So for a bank, if you look at it that way, the only maybe default would be the person paying it, their portion of it. So, I mean, it's a pretty, in some ways, a more secured loan in a way than relying solely on someone to make it themselves. And so I could see the advantage of maybe a bank looking at taking that, at least maybe trying to take a couple and see how it goes. But it's just more discussion. So if there's any banks listening, we would love to talk to you.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So how does the market value that HUD will pay under a voucher correspond to the actual fair market value?
So we recently did an increase on that. So you can, it's based on a couple of factors, but you can do 100%, 110, or 120%. We just increased ours to 120 because we're seeing a significant increase in the cost. And unfortunately, our voucher recipients were not able to even find housing within the range. So we, as an agency, did an increase to match or try to give them a little bit more leeway in that. So housing markets and landlord, rental markets fluctuate. And so HUD has some things built in to allow us to fluctuate a little bit in what we do, but I think right now we're pretty capped out on the top end of what we can do. So that comes back to us negotiating with landlords and saying, hey, if you want this to happen, this is where we need to be. And so that's just a discussion, and sometimes it doesn't work out and sometimes it does.
Right. So is it a significant problem? I mean,
No, not really. I don't think
Most
we've had.
landlords are willing to come down, but there is a cap. Like if they want us to pay $1,800, their rent's $1,800, and it's a 3-bedroom, and that's not what HUD's guideline is, then they'll drop the rent to what the guideline is, or they won't. A majority of the time they do.
Yeah.
But they can't overcharge.
right, but are you, do you get in a situation where people just can't find any housing with a voucher because HUD won't pay enough?
So right now, we've issued all these vouchers, and we have a cabinet full of voucher recipients that are not leased up. So when we issue a voucher, they have to go out and find any landlord can work with us.
Right.
And then it's on them. They have 4 months to go find a landlord and a property that fits their parameters. So we've got right now about maybe 50 to 60 people that have not leased up, even though we've issued vouchers. So that's where we're currently seeing our I guess, clog in the system. And so that could mean many things. It can mean maybe they have a bad rental history. It can mean maybe their credit score or other factors that landlords use to screen people. Maybe there's an issue there. It could mean that maybe they're outside of the financial parameters. It could mean lots of things. So it's hard to tell really. We would have to just do a survey of all of those people and ask them what their difficulties are. But I think we've had discussions about that, and it's a complex situation. But I don't know that I could give you an exact answer of maybe what the specific holdup
Right, okay,
is.
thank you.
Sorry.
Super, Councilmember Mangum.
So with the down payment assistance programs, I think we talked a little bit about something
Yeah.
to help with that. But is there a program that you guys have, specifically your organization, that you might be able to foster something like that?
We have a a tenant plan that we can only pay $300, and it's to help tenants be better tenants, and that's about it. I don't know if our agency would be allowed to do something of that nature. That I'd have to look into that.
And I don't know if HUD has a program like that. I've never heard of one, but
So I'd have to look.
So I have another question, because you were talking about people having, those vouchers are out there, but some people they're just not being used, right?
Yeah.
So I would imagine that there's some landlords out there who are like, I'm not renting to somebody with the voucher, and there might be like some apprehension because of damage to property.
Yep.
Or fear that they're gonna, vandalize it and run, or whatever the case is, right? No way to no recourse or recoup. Can you speak to that? How do you protect against that, or reimbursed, or is there anything?
Yeah, so HUD used to have a policy that they would reimburse X amount to landlords if there was damaged properties. And I think we can assume that every property has the max damage, right? I mean, that's kind of why HUD stopped doing it, is because I think it was probably overused. And so, it's just a funding issue. I mean, if you're paying out, $1,800 to every landlord all over the whole country because every property is maximum damage, you're going to run out of money pretty quick. Mm-hmm. So that was in the city, and then they quit doing it. We started a landlord lunch a couple of months ago with NeighborWorks, and what we were trying to do is to get landlords out to come and talk about these issues. And it's been really difficult. We've had a couple of people show up consistently, but we've not really had a showing of landlords. And it's something we considered maybe doing if we could do a certain portion. If there was damage, maybe you could let us come out and document the damage, and maybe we could do it. There's a couple of things we've discussed, but it's really difficult. Even our own properties that we manage, even the HUD subsidy properties, get damaged. And we can only just send them to collections is really all we can do. So I think there's that apprehension. Our agency in the past has made some decisions that damage relationships based on our payments. They would take money back. And so that reputation is still out there with some landlords. We don't do that anymore. So if there are any landlords that had that issue in the past, it's not an issue anymore. So I think, Corey, it's complex. Mm-hmm. And so we are trying to work on bettering our relationship with the local landlords and trying to work through those challenges. We're a newer agency. Even since April, if you just come and see what we're doing, come talk to us. That's all. That's all we really can do, is just try to get grassroots and get down with the landlords and figure out what we can do. So that's what we're trying to do.
Can I just touch on that for a second? We have been at our landlord lunches giving $300 incentives to landlords that will accept our voucher holders. And then as far as he was saying, we were taking back rent. So if a voucher holder moved out in the beginning or the middle of the month and moved somewhere else, we were taking back a half of a portion of the rent. Well, we've been allowing those landlords to keep it in hopes to build the relationships with the landlords, and they can use that money towards damages as well, if that so happens.
Those changes have been made just to try to help, but, yeah, it's, that $300 incentive was something, because our agency is actually designated as a move-to-work agency, which allows us a little bit more freedom with HUD. And so we can have specific incentives to try to solve those problems. I'm still somewhat new, so I'm trying to look into those problems a little bit deeper. But I think as we are able to make headway, I think we can get there. We can maybe do something.
Okay, Councilmember Cheatham.
If a property owner gets involved in this program, does it in any way complicate their ability to manage who lives there? That is, if they have a problem with a tenant, complaints from others, or whatever it might be, does it in any way complicate their ability to get rid of somebody?
No, because actually we're your ally. And if they're out of line or they're doing something that violates our policies, we will take away their voucher. And so if anything, it in some ways, like, we're gonna help you. And we'll talk with the voucher recipient if you have an issue. And some landlords do call us. We had one the other day that called us, and they were concerned about when they did a maintenance work order, they were concerned about what they saw, the living conditions. And we said, hey, well, we can go do a spot inspection. Would you like us to do that? And they said, yeah. And we said, you should also call, Child Protective Services and do something along those lines if you're that concerned as a landlord. So we're also a resource to landlords and tenants. We're kind of like a neutral party, but we have teeth to enforce the voucher rules, and then they have teeth to enforce the tenant rules as far as what contract they've signed. So if a landlord is considering it, think about it that way, that we're there to help you.
One follow-up, Mr. Mayor. You're involved in Rexburg also, and I'm sure the agency is in communication with other similar agencies across the state. This housing problem, do you see any differential here from other places, or is this very widespread?
Now, I mean, I went to a board, just to like a roundtable discussion in Idaho Falls. They're having the same problem. And then I was recently appointed to the Region 5 Southeast Idaho position for the HIC group, and which is a housing group for the state of Idaho. And I think it's very similar across Idaho in general. I don't think it's just an Idaho problem, but we see a lot of influx of people, and that really puts a strain on the demand. And so it's not something I don't think is going to go away. We just, and plus the cost of materials is really high right now, so building is expensive. And so it's a complicated problem, but no, I don't think we're unique in any way with that problem. What I do want to say, that I do appreciate the city. I know that, and I brought this up in here, that the city applied for a $5 million grant, which we supported. That grant is looking at is taking the houses, the mobile homes or modular homes, and providing updates. And I've spoken to the city and said, hey, we would love to partner with you. If you had some tract of land, we would take our vouchers on those modular homes, and then we would manage the property. And so there are lots of things that the city is doing. It's very progressive and very forward thinking, and I really like that. And then also they just did a grant it's a $2 million grant to try to look at doing a study of this very thing, is like what's going on in the city, what's the housing problems, which we also are in support of. And so Christine does a great job for the city, and I really appreciate that about the city, is that we're not like reactive, that we're proactive. And we're the same way as an agency. At least since I've been there, I'm very proactive. I don't sit back. And so we've been pretty aggressive at what we're doing to try to get out there and solve these problems, because that's what the HUD program is for, is to help people, the underserved and the people in the community that need the help the most. And so that's what we're also trying to accomplish.
One more, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
There's been a lot of talk about how government can try and move to make housing more affordable, which I frankly don't see much of a perspective on. Do you have any insights there that you can share with us?
I don't know how a government can pass any laws to restrict private landowners from doing what they do. I do believe that there probably is a way for the government to maybe restrict fees. So for example, some property management companies charge a $30 a month fee to quote unquote manage that tenant. We do not charge that fee. And so that is an extra expense. Also, they have certain fees that, like for example, an application fee that's like $50, but if you have 2 adults, each has to pay that. And so with HUD, we can't charge application fees. And so there are ways I think the city could maybe get involved in trying to regulate that. But I do recall that there was a situation the Boise City Council voted for something and then it was overturned. So I think it makes it challenging because it would really maybe need to come from a state level. I don't know. It's an interesting thing, but it's a challenge.
Thank you.
Council President.
I do have a question, but I was just going to comment. I think last session, there was legislation, was it last session or 2 sessions ago? But 2, that they were trying to limit the fees. They had companies that were like double charge, especially when there were so many people applying and there weren't enough places, but they were taking the money from all the
Yeah,
people. And
That's a problem.
knowing that they weren't going to have enough places for all those people to be placed. So I think the fees are probably the main thing that the legislature could look at.
Yeah, because I
limiting.
mean, and that's the problem is that like I believe in a free market system. We live in America, and that's at the basis of our country. But at some point, if the free market system overextends itself and takes advantage, and that's where I think in some cases we're at, is that it's an advantage to the landlords, and the tenants are the ones that are struggling. And so I think in a perfect world, if there was a balance. And that's where the government should step in and try to make a balance and try to at least some ways protect the citizens from that. So I don't know what the city's capabilities are in that regard.
And that kind of is a nice segue into the question that I actually had, was to go back to the issue of working with landlords and the reluctance. My understanding was, the damage or condition of the rental unit was part of the reluctance, but that it was really more about, to sort of speak to your point, free market and like what the landlord thinks they can get by renting properties, just putting it out there, on the market, and what are those rates. But if they work with you all and work with the voucher program, that they're not going to be able to get as much as they could. And that's where a lot of the reluctance comes from with landlords. So I was happy to hear about the program you mentioned, or just open houses or whatever you called it, working with NeighborWorks, because I think a lot of this is just an education thing with landlords and making sure that they understand, if they work with you, that there's benefits to that it's not, it's not this bad thing, that they're not going to be losing so much money. So I just wanted to see if you wanted to address
absolutely.
that.
That's exactly the way that we see it, is instead of trying to be like draw a line in the sand and say it's us against them, it's everyone trying to work together to solve the problems of Pocatello. And so I think that's what we're trying to do, is just to educate people. And I understand that there might be some rifts between landlords and the agency in the past, but just come and talk to us. The only thing that we can do as adults and leaders in the community is talk and try to work through problems. If we can't sit down and have a discussion and try to work through the problems, we're never going to solve anything. And so that's really, I think you're spot on, and we just want landlords to come out and talk to us. Tell us what we can do.
And if they do participate, because a lot of it is kind of misunderstandings about the program and how it works and everything, so it is good to have those conversations. But if landlords do choose to participate, how do they feel about that? I mean, are the ones that are choosing to participate, do they feel that it is working for them and they're happy to be part of that program and then they stay with you? Like, once they kind of learn about it, does that,
Absolutely.
Does
We're
it
actually
get
trying,
better?
we're trying to put together a list of resources. We're trying to work with the landlords to say, what are your problems? We even had we had a maintenance presentation, the last one, where we kind of talked about maintenance, regular maintenance on properties. And we talked about, we're trying to be helpful. And so even if there's maybe a mom and pop that own a property and they're considering letting us manage it, like come and talk to us and we'll talk to you about it. We'll show you our maintenance crew. We'll talk about those things that we can help you manage it. And so I think that's really the point is we're trying to get the resource center involved in the community so that we can be a resource for people, for tenants and landlords.
Yeah, because on the other side of it, we've been working with NeighborWorks to do a tenant class as well on how to be a good tenant and how to avoid eviction and, learn some finances and how to manage their finances. And we have, because we're moved to work, there's a program called Ready to Rent. And it has an incentive where we'll pay $300 if they complete the class. It's a 6 weeks. We'll pay $300, I believe it is, towards their security deposit. Or if they've already in a unit and they just take the class, and we'll give them $150 just for participating in it, and then they get a certification. So
Yeah,
And
and that
that's an
goes right
important
to the
point.
landlord. That goes to the landlord. It doesn't go to the tenant.
okay.
So we'll pay the landlord directly.
But I like the idea that the education includes both
Yes.
sides of
sides, yeah,
that.
because it is both sides.
Right. And that, the more educated the tenants are, I think the more willing the landlords will be to then
Our hope.
become an option. Yeah.
Councilmember Cheatham?
Promise this is the last one. Do you see a demand for any particular kind of housing, whether it's apartments or single-family or multifamily, duplexes? Is it single person? Is it families? Do you see any notch in there that we should concentrate on?
I think it's a like a multi-pronged approach because, we have all of these buildings that we own and Christensen Court deals with a specific subset of the population. And we have Portneuf Towers that deals with a specific subset. So there are definitely a need for family housing. There's definitely a need for individual housing. We're also part of the Homeless Coalition. We're doing the Homeless Stand Down in November. We're co-chairing that with Aid for Friends. And part of on the third page, what I would like to do is look at getting into doing our project-based vouchers, taking some of our vouchers that we have and putting them on like modular homes. They're a little bit cheaper to build, and if we did like a subdivision, it would also like help with like creating an environment for the kids to play in and do things like that. And so if there is a tract of land that the city owns or it's condemned, like we would very much be interested in talking about that. And that might solve a couple of problems. As far as like apartments, yeah, there's always a need for apartments. It's very high density, so you can get a lot of people in a smaller area. I think that's what that $2 million grant is for, is to look specifically at that, what specific housing would be unique. We're also considering applying for a HUD grant in which HUD will pay for a group of students who are engineers to come out, and if we get the grant, then they'll come to our city and spend 2 days and work on that very thing and do a survey of the city and say, okay, this would be an ideal location and could potentially build it out for us. And so we're looking at applying for that grant as well through HUD. And so we're looking at a lot of those options, trying to figure that problem out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Super. Well, thank you very much. You've got a lot in here.
Yes.
Appreciate what you do, and thank you for being here today with us. And Jared, Kimberly, Michelle, you did a great job, by the way. You did a fantastic job back there. But thank you very much. And council, I would encourage you, if you have any more questions, definitely reach out and learn more about that. So thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we will move to agenda item number 3 is Pocatello Arts Council update. Representatives from the Pocatello Arts Council will discuss the committee's goals and projects as well as council's policies and expectations.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, council members. I'm Dale Spencer. I've been on the Arts Council for 6 years, and I'm the current chairman. A little background on the Arts Council. We believe the arts create and unite vibrant cultures. We foster an inclusive arts community that empowers artists and audience. And our mission is to strengthen artistic ventures, expression, and community participation throughout the city. We do this through advocacy, grants, network and promotion, and event sponsorship. Our funding is provided by a chief theater settlement, which established a $100,000 fund for the establishment of the Arts Council in 1991. Our annual allocation is $10,000, and unused funds at the end of the fiscal year are returned to our base account, which is maintained by the city. Currently, there's about $40,000 of the original $100,000 in that account. For fiscal year 25, we're looking at doing the Empty Bowls event in conjunction with the food bank. Last year, we raised about $4,000 for the food bank through Empty Bowls event, where we have the artistic community do ceramic bowls. We get together, have an evening where we have hand-thrown ceramics available. We provide a meal and some entertainment. And the bowls are $25, and that gets you the evening. And so we raised about $4,000 last year with that. We're planning that again in March. Every year we bring in Montana Shakespeare in the park. Last year we had over 900 people come down to the quad to watch Shakespeare. We are planning to do that again this year. It's a good way to get people to our community to enjoy some great free theater. New for fiscal year 2025. We're participating in the Festival of Trees. We're sponsoring a tree there with ornaments made by local artists. We have a call for artists right now on the city's website and our website so that we can, again, get a little more visibility for local artists and support a good community project in the Festival of Trees. We have recently started a feature artist program where we pick a local artist, where we go out and look for them. We feature them on our webpage. We link to the city's social media, and we set up a table for them, our art walk, so we can get some local artists a little more recognition, a little more promotion out in the community that they might not have known was available. And we continue with our grants for local artists. So when an artist in the area, any sort of artist, if you're visual, if you're musical, if you're performing art, we will look at your grant application. We will give up to $1,000 per grant. If you tell us what you want to do and how it would benefit the city and the arts. That's who we are and what we do. I'd be glad to take any questions at this point.
Questions? I might just add to the Empty Bowls campaign. That's such a great campaign. I don't know how many bowls we have around our house, but they're beautiful, and local artists make them, and it's just a great evening.
It's a lot of fun.
It is. I would encourage
Last
everybody.
month is a lot of work, but generally it's a lot of fun.
That's for sure. I would encourage anybody to make whatever date it is in March available, because it's a great opportunity and a great thing. So,
Mr. Mayor?
yes.
My question was, what is the date? Do you have the date yet?
Do not.
Okay.
I've talked with the ISU Clay Club. They are making bowls already for
Okay.
next year's event. So they're in the process of making them. Last year, I believe we made about 150, and we went through about 120 that night. And the balance we take to the Art Walk in the following 2 months and are available for purchase at Art Walk.
I was going to encourage people to go as well, but if you absolutely aren't able to make it, you still can get a bowl.
Yes,
So
you can.
I always try to at least get my bowl every year, but it is a good event, and go and support it.
It's a fun event, really fun. You do a great job, Dell. Thank you very much for everything that you do in our community.
Happy to support the community.
That's great. Fantastic. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, super. Thank you.
Yes, excellent. Thank you
And
for the
we'll-
opportunity.
Absolutely. We will move to agenda item 4 is the Fire Union quarterly update. Members of the Pocatello Fire Union will give a council an update of their activities.
Morning, Mayor. Morning, Council. Jordan Van Every, Pocatello Firefighters Local 187 President. I won't take up too much time today. I just kind of wanted to share some of the stuff we've been working on, kind of how our summer's been going. We spent a little bit of time in negotiations this summer, had some good productive sessions. I feel like we were able to come to a good agreement between us and the city, and I appreciate your guys' work on that behind the scenes. We have had a busy fire season this summer, not necessarily around here, but throughout Idaho and the surrounding states. We've had a lot of guys out working on wildland fires around the surrounding communities and around the state.
And we just sent 1 or 2 crews out for the next couple of weeks in a Wyoming fire, I believe.
Right now we have an ambulance with 2 guys on it down in Heber, Utah,
Heber,
on a
that's
big
right.
incident. All the tankers that have been flying over
Yeah.
that one. So appreciate your guys' support on that. I think it's an important thing for us as a community, as a fire department, as a city, to be able to help those surrounding communities. I know that it's a great thing for our members because they are able to get on these larger fires. They're able to learn a lot and gain a lot of knowledge and experience and bring that back to us here. I was on one earlier this summer, and it was a lot of hard work, but the stuff that we learned out there and the knowledge that we gained is huge, I know, for me personally. So appreciate your guys' support on that too.
Well, and I think it's good for the city because it helps us fund those wildland fire trucks
Yep.
and some of the things that we're able to do that we don't have to ask our taxpayers to fund, and so.
And it's good to build some partners with those surrounding communities when we're out there working side by side with some of those smaller rural departments too. So,
Yeah. So,
we recently had our Break for Breakfast fundraiser,
that's right.
which is a partnership that we go into with Portneuf, and we create T-shirts and we sell them at their event, and we sell them in the gift shop at the hospital there. I think there still might be a few left.
You're almost out the
I don't
day
know.
of, I know that.
I think they sell out pretty fast.
I didn't get mine this year.
I'll see if we can get you one, Linda.
Okay.
Um,
I don't want
But
to,
they go-
I've got the full collection. I need to get mine.
really, really fast. So we're usually able to raise somewhere around $3,500. We're still kind of waiting for the final numbers to come in this year. But that money goes to the Cancer Center at Portneuf, and it is used to help those families that have logistical costs, so that is associated with cancer treatment. So we're glad that we get to participate in that with Portneuf and give some money back to those families that need it. We got our Fill the Boot fundraiser coming up, which is a fundraiser for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. It's a US and Canada wide fundraiser, and locals all over the United States participate in it. They're able to, we've raised millions of dollars since the inception of this. I don't even know how long ago it was started. But we're usually able to raise about $11,000 in one day doing the MDA fundraiser. So we'll be at El Rancho and Highline this year. So stop on by and dump your change in a boot. We'll appreciate it.
What's the date?
It is this Saturday,
This
the
Saturday.
12th, I think is what it is. So, yeah, other than that, that's where we're at.
Doing a lot of great things.
When you attend these wildfire things out of this jurisdiction, do our firemen have a chance to do more than just put out a fire? Are they involved in command and control or learning those kind of skills too?
So, yeah, so usually we just send an engine or an ambulance out. But the engine, and when I say engine, I mean the small wildland truck, right? They have an engine boss, which is a certified position, which is kind of it's a ranking system in the wildland world. And we've been trying to get a lot of our other guys trained up. So we usually take somebody that's working on that task book, on the engine boss task book. So it's kind of a multifaceted thing. So we're able to get people training while we're out on those. And even all the way down to the firefighters that are sitting in the back seat, they also have task books that they're working on too. So as far as that goes, that's the big one that we're working on right now. We do have a couple of other guys that came with certifications, single resource certification, what we call them. So they would go and they would be kind of over a division. They would be kind of a boss over multiple people. So there's opportunity there for us to be able to train other guys to that level as well, which exponentially kind of disseminates through the department as far as our experience goes. When we do have a large incident, these guys are able to provide that sort of leadership and that sort of role for us here at home too.
Follow up. When you get the request for those kind of services from another agency, do they specifically ask for those kind of skill sets? Or does that just come because that's who we want to send?
So we're on a list, and so we have kind of all of our qualifications and all of our equipment that we're able to send out. And so when a fire needs a specific resource, then IDL will reach out to us and they will request that resource. And we have to meet the qualifications for that specific resource. So like for an engine, you have to have an engine boss on the engine. So if that answers your question.
It does. I got an email last night from IDL that says, because of the year we've had, they're extending the fire season that normally would close now.
Yeah.
And they're going to extend another month because of those big fires that are still burning across the state.
I know that we
Right
have,
now, there's no weather relief in sight.
yeah, we have some red flag days coming up still. It's still really dry and really warm for this time of year. I was
Yeah.
out in the yard working yesterday and I was like, oh, it's supposed to be fall. It was hot.
It's
sweating.
true. It's true. Okay, anything else? Council, I might just give you a quick update. I know that we've approved for the fire stations, and this isn't really a union, but I'll throw it in the middle of this. The stairs on Station 1,
Yeah.
the back stairs, those should be complete by the end of the month, I believe, if I remember right, which will be nice. We can actually use those again. And then the bathroom update that we're doing with the showers and stuff like that we've approved, I believe should be started and going in December-ish timeframe to be finished fairly quickly thereafter. So we've made some other, definitely some needed things. And this is something that the union just, and another one is the parking lot in the Station 5, the parking lot and the pavement on that area there, that we don't think that's going to last another year, and so we're moving forward and hopefully can get that taken care of before the hot plants close down and stuff like that. But those are things that the union they've just mentioned, and the council and the fire chief. I think there's a good relationship between
Yeah.
the administration and the union, and they've had those discussions, and things are moving forward on that front so that we're
And I think the tone alert system is due to be
that's right.
completed up here shortly.
In
They've
the
been
next,
working on it. So.
yeah, in the next month, that alert system will finally be up and running, and I understand that members are really excited about that.
Yeah, it'll be nice.
And
It's a
so-
nice system. We're excited to have
Well,
that up and running.
we think that's going to cut our response time in some situations 90%, and when you don't get the notice, they can't respond, and this will definitely help a tremendous amount. So it's good, and so it's good to have the union support on all of those things as well. So thank your body for that. And I think I saw Corey and Josh. No, just Corey.
I just wanted to say thank you for representing the union and the firefighting staff. You personally do a great job representing, and I greatly appreciate it. And like every other year, like how we've done the Easter egg hunt, how you guys have been like huge participants in that. I appreciate it. We're looking at doing it again. So, man, you guys,
Perfect.
you guys are super highly active in the community, and I love it. My kids love seeing you guys around and whatnot. And so I just want to say thank you. And if you would extend those appreciations to the rest of the union and the staff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
And then Linda.
And I also wanted to say thank you as well, but I wanted to specifically thank you and your board and those that participated and did all the work to reach the CBA agreement. I think it's a very, very good agreement and a good contract, and I know you guys worked hard on that. And so thank you for all that you do, but specifically, I think a good year of negotiations. It was a good process and a good result.
I agree.
And that's the result of a lot of hard work. So we very much appreciate that.
Exactly. Super. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 5 is our police union quarterly update. I am not seeing them, but I know they've got a lot of training going on today with some different things, so I'm not super surprised I don't see them in the room right now.
Turkey.
Let's talk turkey. Councilman Cheatham wants to talk turkey, so we'll jump right down to agenda item 6. Wild turkey population in Johnny Creek area update. Representatives from the Idaho Department of Fish and Game, IDFG, will be in attendance to present an update to council in regards to results of the exception to city code, which allowed IDFG to issue and administer permits, allowing landowners and their designees, I don't know why we have to write a book to get to this point, as identified on permits to lethally remove turkeys on the Johnny Creek drainage area within city boundaries. Good morning.
Morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. Appreciate you giving us some time to talk with you today. I'm Dan Guerin, Regional Supervisor for Idaho Fish and Game, and with me I've got Colby Hay, our wildlife biologist that's been overseeing this project. Yeah, you just took care of half of what I was going to talk about.
That's exactly what I thought. Right?
The introduction of where we've been in the past, and so we want to give a summary of how things went and tell you what we saw, what we learned. I will say that the permissions that you gave us to explore this option did require a lot of close communication with the mayor's office and the police department. That went all very smoothly. Little bit of the backstory. We've got certain tools available to us to deal with overabundances of turkeys in town. We do some trapping and translocating of populations. Prior to coming to the city council last year, we had moved 49 turkeys out of the Johnny Creek area. After we got authority and permission from the city, we issued 13 lethal take permits to landowners in the Johnny Creek area. We also denied 4 permits that we got requests for. The way we would do it, when somebody would request a permit, we'd bring them into the office, pull up their property on Google Earth, look at the proximity to neighbors, the slopes of the land, and determine whether it was a safe area to execute something like this or not. And some of the areas were not. Other areas, we requested that the landowner shoot from an elevated position, such as a balcony or a deck or a second story window, so that they were directing their shot down into the ground where it was safer. Even though we issued 13 permits, one landowner, as we were talking to them and explaining, the nuances of all this, they decided not to use their permit. So of the 12 permits we issued, we did harvest 18 turkeys. Harvest was limited a little bit by the warmer February and March that we saw. That allowed turkeys to move out of town and kind of get back up where they belong. And so that was a good thing from us. When we initially talked about the permit, we told you there was 2 potential outcomes here that we anticipated. One being the permits were significant enough that it reduced the herd size. We were looking for 50 to 75 turkeys harvested. That didn't happen. But the second goal or potential outcome was that turkeys would disperse more. And, we had these mega flocks of 100 or 150 birds. And we were successful at reducing that abundance. They broke into small groups and they kind of spread through the neighborhoods and really reduced or frankly eliminated the complaints that we had been hearing. And so we think that was very successful. Interestingly, we also got additional comments from some members of the public that appreciated seeing small bands of turkeys moving through their yards. They hadn't seen that in a while. And they appreciate that wildlife viewing opportunity that came from that. So based on all of those efforts, the lack of issues reported at IADFG, and the reduction of turkey conflicts, we think that the lethal take permit was successful. We didn't have any safety issues, no property damages, no complaints from neighbors, anything like that. We were pretty successful in how this was executed.
Yes.
During this, before and during and since, has there been any increased sightings on predators, like mountain lions or anything like that?
We routinely get predator sightings. Lions in town are common, particularly as you get into the wintertime. So distinguishing whether you know, and the light winter plays a lot into that too. When you have a heavy winter, a lot of critters come into town and predators will follow them. The light winter last year, our complaints on lions in particular have been down. So whether that's related to the turkey issue or the light winter, it's really hard to distinguish, but we've had years where we've had many more complaints than we had last year. So moving forward, we're committed to using all the tools in our toolbox to address turkeys. We're still going to have a turkey issue in town. We just started getting our first notifications from landowners that, hey, I'm seeing a bunch of birds out here. Colby is lining up to do some turkey trapping in the Gibson Jack and Pocatello Creek areas. Usually we need the snow to start flying to cover up the natural food sources of turkeys, so they'll come into our bait, and then we can trap them and relocate them. But we do anticipate continued problems in the coming years on turkeys, and we look forward to working with the council on repeating what we did last year on the lethal take permits, if you guys are willing to do that. And on a related but separate topic, we'd be interested in talking with you guys about managing deer in town. We have an abundance of deer in town, and that's part of what makes our city great. At times, deer can be overabundant and can cause frustrations for landowners. There's a lot of towns or a lot of cities across the nation that implement urban hunts in some form or fashion. I was doing a little research for this coming up to this meeting and realized that in Washington, D.C., they have an urban deer hunt to help control wildlife populations. And so if you guys were interested, we'd be interested in drafting a report of what these other cities are doing. Maybe we can let you guys look at that, and if you want to reconvene and have a discussion on that, we're more than happy to do that. But we'll stand for questions if anybody has anything.
Go ahead.
I would like to know a kind of geographic distribution of what the complaints look like from citizens regarding the deer. Is there a specific area in town where people are having issues? What kind of issues are they having with the deer? So kind of a log of those complaints. Yep. And showing where that happens in town. I'm sure there are some areas that probably don't mind it as much, right? When they moved in, they knew that they were going to have deer, and that's kind of the expectation. And so they didn't plant a garden, for example, or they properly fenced it. So I would be interested in knowing what kind of complaints and where those complaints are happening. Secondly, I know last year we had a very short turnaround time for the turkey hunt. If the goal would be to continue to and perhaps harvest more turkeys, I'd be interested in that agenda item coming before council earlier and giving landowners a longer opportunity, more education to get more of them involved, if that's something you're planning on coming back for next spring.
So can I address that?
Sure.
In the motion.
Did we leave it?
We left it open.
Okay,
so
I couldn't
that
remember if we had or not.
they could just do that with the stipulations that they continue to work with the police and the mayor's office, and so.
I knew we had talked about it, but I couldn't recall if we had left it in perpetuity.
Dan and I had talked a couple times about this, and I've looked at that, and that's where that motion was
Okay.
we kind of left that open. And
Great.
And so with the expectation from council that the mayor's office would let you know that that's happening when that happens. And so I anticipate Dan reaching out and saying, hey, we're getting these complaints, we're looking into this. And as soon as that happens, you'll start hearing a little bit about that, so that that's available. Because of that, we didn't want to get behind the 8 ball again and do all that stuff.
Right.
And I'm curious what the council's opinion of this deer thing is, because we've also had a discussion about that too. So it'll be interesting to see where the council goes. They've got some neat ideas and the ability to do something like that, but it'll be interesting to see where that goes.
And we've actually partnered up with ISU currently. So deer populations are going to rise and flow and ebb with the severity of the winter. 2 years ago, we had a harsh winter and it really knocked the deer herd back, and complaints are down. And so I don't think we're in a big hurry to do anything. I think we've got time. So we've partnered with ISU. We've got some of their biology students doing deer surveys for us. We're hopeful that can continue for the foreseeable future, for years in advance, so we can kind of track that population of deer, see when migrating deer come into town, when they leave. Ultimately, we would like to have some kind of a system, maybe through the city, where somebody can log into the city website and lodge a complaint, or I've got these nuisance deer, so that we can get at exactly what you're talking about. It's likely that we'll be able to correlate, deer abundance with complaints, which would give us an idea of where we need that deer herd to be to kind of keep complaints at a reasonable level. We also collect a lot of roadkill. We pick up a lot of deer in town. We track that. Roadkill goes up when deer herds are up, and we can kind of have all three of those pieces at work here as we have discussions about what do we do, if anything.
And we've got a couple questions, but I might just add to that. I was out on Bannock Highway last night, and there's a herd of deer of 20 that were getting ready to get hit by cars as they were shooting across the thing. So it's definitely an issue that we probably need to be looking at and do something with. And to answer your question, where are the complaints? Everybody moves into the Johnny Creek area thinking it's really cool, the deer are in there. The next year, they have a complaint because there's too many deer and they can't grow anything, and they're a nuisance, and they're this and that. And so a few years ago, Fish and Game had a big town hall meeting at your offices, and that place was packed full of people with complaints about urban deer and what they're doing. And a lot of the testimony that I heard from people were, we moved there, it was really neat, and then it wasn't. And so it's kind of a novelty at first, and then it isn't anymore. Kind of like the turkeys were a novelty, and they got some compliments of, hey, it's kind of neat to see them go through our yard again. But when there's 150 of them sitting there, that's not neat anymore. And so I think that's kind of where that goes. And so that's why we probably need to have a real discussion about that. But I think I saw Councilmember Mangum and Councilmember Paulson with a question. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
You go ahead. Start.
Okay, question for my question. You're going to come back later and talk more about the deer stuff, or are we hashing this?
No. They'll come back later. They're going to do some stuff on it and stuff.
We can put together a summary of what other cities do, just so you have an idea, and we have a better idea of what options have been successful elsewhere. Okay. And that could be informative to the
I
discussion.
think what Dan's trying to do right now is get a feel for the council. Are you generally okay with having the discussion? Are you not? And then they'll definitely come back for that. Yeah, we're not gonna. Today's the opening of season. Maybe we won't have a problem.
So I live up near Dairy Creek, up that way, and we get tons of deer up there. And at first, like you said, it was a novelty. It was like, man, this is cool, And then later on in the fall, late summer, they start walking down the street or on the sidewalk as if, they're using the crosswalk. And I'm like, who are these? Like, where do these deer come from? I have a video on my phone where I yell at them, like, hey, you guys lost? And they just stop and look at me and I'm like, whatever. So anyway, my question is there any concern, besides just the sheer number, is there a concern with like disease and things like that also that we're looking at, or an increase in disease? Or is it just the sheer fact of there's large numbers within the herds and within the Pocatello area?
That's a great question. Chronic wasting disease is a neurological disease that affects deer and elk. It has now turned up in Idaho. It's been in Wyoming. It's been in Utah. We've got our first cases as of 2 years ago.
Yep.
Up in the Panhandle. Now we've got it down a little bit lower. Some research has shown that cities, because they have high populations, high densities of deer, can be hotbeds for CWD. And so that is a concern. It's not, I think, the big driver on this. I think complaint issues is the bigger driver on having this conversation. But in the back of our minds, there are ways to kind of reduce our risks, and managing the deer herd is one of those ways.
Thank you.
Well, and when you get a large population, it's expensive for citizens to continue to have their cars repaired.
Yeah.
From hitting deer and stuff like that, and it's no good for deer, it's no good for citizens, and so it's also probably one of those things that it's an issue for us drivers as well. Like last night, I mean, I didn't hit a deer, but they were definitely looking to dart across in front of cars. It's a new form of video games, I guess, the deer are playing. I'm not sure. I got Council President and then Councilmember Cheatham.
There is one spot out there that I counted one night, close to 60. Just sat for a while and and they just cross over the road in the same spot. So, you could be stopped for quite some time. The question I had, well, it's really more of a comment, but I would very much like to hear what other cities have done and what their programs look like and what the results have been, but also very much what the reception has been from the people in the communities. Because my feeling is deer are going to be a harder sell than turkeys.
Yep.
I think people, I don't know of any Disney character that's a turkey, but deer people feel strongly about. So we need to look at what we need to do and look at what the problems are, but I really want to know how other communities have gotten their community on board with dealing with the problem.
Yeah, great question and great point. Eyelashes make all the difference in the world.
I do.
That is very true.
I've seen them on a Volkswagen. Cute. Yes.
Super. Okay, Rick?
I'm going to rant for just a minute. What Dan's talking about is a big problem in a lot of places. We're killing a lot of deer in town. It's causing a lot of vehicle accidents, a lot of property damage. And that doesn't even talk about the vegetation damage and the money people put into shrubbery and trees and things that are extensively damaged throughout our community. I brought this up yesterday, that this meeting was going to be held today at the Senior Activity Center board meeting. And I was surprised, among that dozen or so people, I expected a lot of resistance, and not a single person was against the idea of controlling the deer. It surprised me. What also surprised me was on the east side, I got complaints from some of those people about rising populations on the east side of the valley, not just the west side in the Johnny Creek area. And they're beginning to be over there. And I think one of the things we have to recognize is we screwed up the deer's migration in this area when we built I-15. The deer around here travel a long way to winter to get to 90% and some of those other areas, Tex Creek and so forth. And those 60 or 70 miles are what they're used to traveling every day in the old days. Now they can't. They can't cross those fences. And mankind has created a problem for these animals. And the overpopulation, not just CWD, but there's EHD and other diseases that deer get when they get concentrated like that. And CWD is 100% fatal. There is nothing we can do. Humans have a version of it. There's a couple of them. Creutzfeldt-Jacobs and Kuru are the same disease in humans, and it hasn't been proven yet that CWD is transmissible across species. But they're very close to proving that is possible. And I think eliminating concentrations of animals in our community is a safety factor, not just from disease, but from the potential conflict, especially during rut, between humans, walking dogs, and bucks. is a problem. When we were working on the Wildlife Feeding Committee a couple of years ago, I had an example. One of the members there told the story of how one Sunday she had decided not to go to church, but her husband went. And it was during rut in the deer population. And as he was headed down the hill in Johnny Creek and stopped at a stoplight, a buck charged his car and broke out the passenger side window. If she had been sitting there, she would have been injured. And, you know, in rut, those bucks do crazy things. They don't respond like you would think a normal sane person or sane animal would. And I think it's just a matter of time. If we don't do something to control this, we are going to have a real problem down the road because that herd continues to build. You know, as good as their conditions are in town, I suspect we have a high twinning rate because nutrition's very good. You know, turkeys will do 12 poults a year a piece, so you get 100, and the next year you could have a whole lot more. Now, they're not all going to survive, but there can be a lot more critters out there. There's a community in Wyoming has a problem with antelope, and they have a public hunt on their golf course every year. Starts at dawn and goes until 8 o'clock, and you can go on the golf course. They close it to golfers to shoot antelope because they got to get rid of them. They've got more than they can handle in that particular community. And, you know, I think Pocatello has been the tip of the spear in doing this kind of remediation for wildlife. And we're being watched all across the state, and people are, I'm hearing they're envious that we've taken these kind of actions to the benefit of our community. We all like the deer. I mean, I know a lot of people have a little dose of Bambiitis. You know, they don't want to damage that Disney character. But the only way we're going to control its population is by killing does. You can't control the population by killing bucks. And I think we have to come to that realization. We've got to kill the females to stop the reproduction within the community. And I look forward to an opportunity to discuss this because I think we need to start planning. This herd is not going to decrease. A lot of these generations have lived in the city limits so long, they don't know how to survive anywhere else. They have no experience. They're like Corey's talking about. One of the people yesterday said she lives on the west side, and the deer are in her yard up and down the sidewalks. They can't back out of their driveway sometimes because the deer are standing there munching on grass or rose bushes and things. And it's a potentially dangerous situation, let alone the attraction of large predators into the community by the ready availability of that tenderloin. So I'm all in favor of exploring this further.
Sounds to me like the council's more than willing to have the discussion and stuff. I guess my question to the council would be, what kind of time frame would you be interested in having this discussion?
Whatever time frame they feel is, if they don't feel like it's, you know, if they feel Fish and Game feels that as of right now, there isn't an issue, you know, we have 6 months, a year, however long before we're going to reach the point where we're going to need to enact it. You know, I'd like 3 months before we ever consider doing the urban hunt ahead of time. After that, as early as later Fish and Game wants is fine by me.
What kind of time frame do you think?
So the way our rules cycle works, every 2 years, we open the door for changes in our hunting regulations. We're going into that in December. I think that is way too fast for this. I think we need way more time to put together a thorough review of what other folks have done and have some discussions with the public. And so I think a realistic time frame to do something would be 2 years from December. That gives us 2 years to talk through this and plan and be strategic and get something on the ground if that's what you choose.
Do you anticipate ever needing to do what we've done with the turkeys, for example, and where it's kind of an emergency thing, and using your authority that way with deer? Do you see that in the next couple of years?
It's always a possibility, but the reproductive rates of turkeys versus deer, turkeys can blow up in a year and fall outside of that regulation cycle. Deer, it's a little more slow and also winter dependent. And so I think we can bring more strategic approach to this and and do it at a slower fashion. Currently, I don't anticipate a need to do an emergency hunt, but it's always a possibility.
Why don't we look then at sometime maybe February-ish to come back with to the council and have a discussion about it in a work session, and if that gives you enough time to put a presentation together and stuff, and then have those discussions
I think that'd work great.
and stuff. Yes.
Do depredation hunts fall under the normal 2-year cycle?
Depredation hunts are an on-demand tool, so that's similar to what we're doing with the turkey program. And if we wanted to do something similar to that, it would just follow that same turkey process, and then we could issue on a case-by-case basis a depredation permit.
Okay. So we could move faster.
We could.
If, what determination would there be to put a depredation hunt in place?
For turkeys, it was the nuisance complaint, right? We've got concentrations, clear issues with overabundance in very specific locations, and it was a solvable problem by using that tool. The deer thing, because deer are not concentrated on one property the way those turkeys are, they're here one day and then they're over here another day. We really need to come at this from a herd management perspective more so than a depredation perspective. But depredation tools are certainly available for deer.
Okay. So unless there's another major issue and concern, let's look at, February, March timeframe to,
April would be good for me.
what's that?
I said April would be good for me.
Okay, let's look at an April timeframe.
Okay, we'll come back in April.
No, I want March, and I want that legislature done in March this time.
If we can get it done before March, then yes.
Rick will move heaven and earth to make sure that he's there for that meeting. That'll keep that nice and tight.
Let's see how good Rick is. We'll do it in March. See if we can to get them out of Boise.
Perfect.
Heck, if he's that good, let's do it in February.
Yeah, that's good with me. Last week of January.
That's right. Anyway, so yeah, let's look at something and probably look at April timeframe to come back to the council to kind of just start those discussions with the council. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea to have some town hall meetings that you've been, you can bring some information from that back by then and stuff, but you just entered your busy season, I think, and so
we're about to get busy. Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
so
and
that'll
I
give
think,
you a little bit of time.
if I can, Mr. Mayor, April is a better time because winter has such a huge effect on deer. And until we see how the winter goes, particularly here in the valley, we really don't know what kind of population we're going to be facing in the future. Because as Dan indicated, they fluctuate dramatically. And if we have a mild winter, they'll migrate back up out of town. If we don't, they'll all move into town.
Move down, yeah.
And it just, it's such a flexible thing with deer.
That's true. So, okay. Sounds good.
Okay,
We
look
go
forward
that
to
route.
working with you guys on this.
Dan, thank you very much.
Thanks for your
Appreciate
time.
it. Okay, council, do you want to take a break for a second, or do you want to just power through? We're going to break for a second. I heard a yes. So we got a break, but let's try to make it a quicker break instead
Yeah, it's
of
always
a
between 10 and
regular break that we have.
Did you get to a certain age?
I also.
Much for joining us after our break. We'll go ahead and get started again with agenda item number 7, which is assigned code updates. Planning and Development Services staff members will be present to discuss a proposed repeal of Title 15.20, sign code and amendments to Title 17, zoning regulations. Council received public comments during the public hearing held on September 5, 2024, regular city council meeting, and the council provided feedback to staff at the September 12, 2024 work session. Council may wish to direct staff to prepare an ordinance for consideration at a future city council meeting. Good morning, it's still morning.
Good morning,
Jen.
Mayor and Council. My name's Jennifer Flynn. I'm the Assistant Planner for the Planning Department. Just as a reminder, like the mayor just stated, last time we met, council voted to not include illumination curfew for EMCs and to cap off-premise signs. I was directed to go back and refine the proposed code to clean up any EMC standards. And so that's what I've done over the last week with the help of sign contractors and also our legal department. You can find these refined standards on page 12, section E5 of the proposed sign code. I do note, we did maintain the curfew for the RCP zones, which serve as buffers between residential and commercial zones. This curfew exists in the current code, and so staff recommends that we maintain that. That's at your discretion. And I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Councilmember Cheatham?
I'm curious, in that buffer zone, how many current signs would be affected by the curfew?
I don't have that number with me. Typically, most signs in EMCs in the RCP are schools, the school's electronic signs. I could definitely look into that for you, though, if you'd like.
The other issue I have is on page 8,
Okay.
under subparagraph 5, I cannot make sense of what it says. It says signs within a sight triangle shall not be more than 3 feet and less than 8 feet in height from the grade. I don't know how you can do those two things.
So this is actually directly from state code. We've reviewed it and gone over it, and we write the site triangle information to, complement what else is regulated at the state level. And basically the way we take it is a sign can be either up to 3 feet or 8 feet and above. And that's what would allow it to be within the site triangle.
So it could be 8 feet, the post, the sign itself could be 8 feet high. All right, that does begin
Yes,
to
sir.
make,
So,
all right.
so let me clarify.
Yeah.
For my sake, a post,
Can be-
8 feet, the bottom of the sign is at 8
Right.
foot and then up.
Correct.
Is there a height of how high? Does it say
Yeah,
that?
there's a height limit on signs in different zones, and that would be found back in the table, which starts on page 11 for pole signs. So, a lot of our signs are already grandfathered because they pre-exist. But like, for instance, common signs, right? The signs where you have multiple tenants in a facility, those are different than pole signs. So it just depends on the category of the sign. And if it's within that site triangle, if it meets the site triangle specifications.
Okay, yes, Councilmember Mangum.
The majority of these revisions look good. We had some conversation about working with a third-party vendor about monitoring these signs and making sure that they're, like, the lumens or the candle lumens are set to where they're supposed to be for the testing and whatnot. Have we made any headway there?
So I've worked extensively with the gentleman that was here at the work session to come up with the illumination standards. I don't know that we've determined a path forward as far as a third-party interaction with our monitoring. Jeff did offer to create a video that would help, we can put out to sign contractors and help, and business owners to help inform them of what we're looking for, how this stuff is measured, things like that. So I think that the city plans to do it on our own with the assistance and advice from people that are more experienced with these things.
So when it comes to, like, enforcing the code, how are we moving forward with that? Because that was part of the conversation that we had with the gentleman, was how to enforce it, how to get it, how to have like an affidavit saying that this is meeting the standard. So if it goes above, because that's part of the problem, is we keep having people who keep jacking up the illumination. So if it goes outside of the scope of the standard of what we've written in this policy, how do we then put the teeth back into that? How do we reinforce that?
So we're just following our current code enforcement process. And so if we get a complaint on an electronic sign, I would then go out to take measurements of the illumination of that sign. And that's the process that we would follow that's on page 12. We just worked very specifically to come up with a process that was going to be we would be able to do it without asking for the sign owner to turn on and turn off the sign. And then, so just say we go out, we take measurements, we find that a sign is above the illumination that it's supposed to be, then our typical process within the city is to write a letter to both the property owner and the business owner, if those are two different people. Let them know that they're in violation of our code. They typically have 2 weeks to respond. If they don't respond within those 2 weeks, we write them another letter saying you will be cited with a misdemeanor if you don't respond to this request. And that's the way we go through all of our code enforcement issues or cases.
So therein is the issue, because we've been trying to enforce these codes for a while, and it keeps getting out of hand. So we might need to revisit that then as a process to keep things within compliance, because we keep having these issues or these complaints where they're too bright. So then we look at doing a curfew, but that doesn't necessarily work. And so the enforcement really is kind of the issue. And so I think having like what the gentleman had suggested was having a third party person come out, or if the city does it, if we do it on our own, to go out and to measure it, and then get something that says, hey, this is now up to standard. I think that does help a little bit.
I think that the third-party idea was a good idea, but I think after we started talking about the legality of it and how we push it and who has control over this and that, if I remember right, the council kind of felt more comfortable with, okay, let's figure this out a different way, because we're now going into private businesses and doing some things that we weren't comfortable with. And I'm not sure our legal department was super comfortable defending some of those actions. And so I think that we talked about a different direction at that point. And so we might have to do something. My issue is, there's a complaint, we send a letter, we're a week after the complaint, they get the letter, they give 2 more weeks to do that. Now we're 3 weeks out. And if they don't do anything, we send another letter, which is another, actually 3 weeks, because it takes time to go out and redo that. And now we're 6 weeks out and nothing's happened, but we have a threat of a misdemeanor instead of hitting this a little bit harder than we probably should. So it's kind of, we need to speed that process up, I think, personally.
So a follow-up to that, though, is so you got a property owner and you got the business owner, 2 different people. Who gets the misdemeanor if they don't comply? Both?
It's a great question. I've never issued a misdemeanor, so I don't know.
We've gone down that road too, and it's a tricky situation in that as well. And so there's some things that on that end of stuff that we have to figure out and work out. Knowing what our courts have done in the past here with those misdemeanors and who gets those and what, that one's also tricky.
Yeah.
So we've got to figure that out. So let's see, I've got Councilmember Mansfield and then Councilmember Nichols, Council President Lurick, and then Councilmember Cheatham.
Let's say business owner gets a letter, it's found out of compliance, we send them the letter, they make the adjustments. 3 months later, we get another complaint, we go measure it, it's out of compliance again. Is there any sort of like escalation clause in our enforcement that if they receive or it's found to be out of compliance 3 times within a 12-month period, example, right? I don't care about the specifics, but 3 times in a 12-month period that we skip the letter process and we just go straight to issuing a citation or a misdemeanor?
Not that I'm aware of.
That's something that we probably should.
I think the repeat offenders, because if I just because especially knowing, I think that even would resolve the the long-term problem, like the problem of the time it takes in order to issue those citations. What it means then, as pointed out, let's say that we go through that process. I turn up my sign, we go through that process, I receive the letter, I spend a couple weeks, a month later, or two months after the first initial complaint was made, I've adjusted my sign down. I know now that it takes nearly 2 months for that to take place. I wait a month, wait 2 months, turn my sign up a little bit, turn my sign up a little bit. My sign's now out of compliance. A month later, I finally get the complaint. Every 6 months, I could really feasibly have my sign above the limit and run that for, 10 months out of the year and just turn it down on the 1 month after I get the letter. If we don't have some sort of mechanism that says if are found in multiple violations, we skip the notification process and you're just issued the misdemeanor. I don't know if that's something that we could explore, but I would be interested in that.
It's interesting how your mind works now. I'm kind of interested in this.
I'll just mention that I think that the way we go about code enforcement, I think, is more of a policy versus written into code.
Okay.
And so policies can be refined based on guidance that we
Yeah,
get.
and that is correct. And so we need to change some of those policies probably,
Okay.
as I understand it. Let's see, Brent, Linda, then Rick.
So with this new language on page 12, section 5, we have made it easier for staff to enforce the regulations. Isn't that right? Sort of the reason we changed some of that language?
Yeah, I think
We're
so.
making it easier? Mm-hmm. Okay,
And easier to defend in court.
right,
you know? Yep.
right, okay. That's all, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a question, but I just was going to comment on the sort of devious situation that Josh described.
Watch this guy.
But it's interesting because we've had similar situations with other codes too, like people who don't want to mow their grass, or don't want to cut their trees or whatever, that you just go all the way to the limit until you have to cut them and then you cut them. But that you're just going to keep staying at the same point in the cycle. We can never sort of close out that issue. And that's always been, to me, the problem with code enforcement is how do we get something done and ended? But my question is, and unfortunately, with my contacts today, I can't read this.
That's okay.
But I just wanted to have you go over a little bit again the curfews, or the idea of having a curfew, that we took that out everywhere except the one place where it acts as a kind of buffer.
Yeah, the residential commercial professional zone.
RCP.
Yep.
And can you say a little bit more about where that will be? Do you have
Where the RCP zones are?
Where these kind of buffer zones are, or is that too broad?
Jim might be a better
Okay.
one to answer that question. I could certainly show you on our zoning
Or
map.
just some examples of where we're looking at?
Jim Anglesey, Long Range Planner. RCP is typically schools are zoned RCP. It's in the idea of RCP is to be a transition from commercial to residential. It may not always act that way, but places like Center Street, Clark Street is RCP. You've got chunks of it along Alameda and Pocatello Creek. And so really it's kind of meant as to be that buffer between commercial and residential. But our biggest ones are like that Clark Center and Clark and those types of areas.
Okay. Thank you.
Probably a big offender of that would be there at the Highland High School where that sign, they've got that sign and it's difficult to get them to turn that down and to keep it where it is.
Interesting, since our last discussion, that sign has not been a problem.
Hasn't been a problem.
Somebody must have been watching.
They must have been watching.
2 more months.
But that sign would.
Yeah, wait, give them a,
wait
give
2
them a
months,
couple
Rick.
months. Sounds like Josh is in charge of that sign.
That sign
But-
would be subject to a curfew?
That would be subject to a curfew, is that correct?
Currently, RCP does have a curfew from 9:30 to 6:30, I believe.
So it should be anyway, which is kind of the problem. But you've got a couple others areas. I mean, they've got those signs on the schools, and the schools seem to be a big part of that right there. And I don't know where that comes from, but that's.
But that's also an example of a type of sign, because I know they're advertising like school events and different things, but they're not a business.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think a curfew is less problematic for them because they're closed at night, no one's there, no one's seeing anything, and they're not advertising a business.
But we've got a curfew now, and it's
Yeah.
just a matter of keeping that curfew going. So,
Yeah.
okay. Councilmember Cheatham.
And yet along that same line, if they've got a basketball game going on or something, there will be people there till 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And that's where I struggle with putting a curfew on any sign, because there are times when you want people to know what's going on at Highland High School. And if they just would enforce the illumination code, it would not be a problem. Those things don't even cast a shadow at 3/10 of a candle. It's different. The question I have is, well, commenting on what Josh was talking about, I think when it comes to who gets assessed a fee, it's whoever has control of the sign. Because I know that, sign companies go in and build these things, and then control of them is turned over to the property owner, or whoever's managing that sign should be the one responsible.
Yep.
Because those things are easily managed, as we saw in our little tour we had 6 years ago. Take a laptop out, dial it in, you can control the brightness of those signs and make a black screen and turn them back on and do the whole thing very quickly on site. And that's who should be fined or subject to a misdemeanor.
And what the sign companies did say, and it seems correct, is that they do the training for the business owner of how they run their sign, and then they are the ones who are given control and have the ability then to turn up the brightness.
Yeah, and I think that's who should be responsible.
I agree.
On another issue, I can't find it, but in here when I was reading all this, it talked about signs on doors. And if a business chooses to put their hours on a door, or a restaurant chooses to hang a sign in a door that features a special or something, is that a sign? Is that affected by how much advertising they can do on their building?
Well, so a sign is defined as an advertisement for that, for the business. And so there's a difference between a sign and a display. And so, as we've talked about it as staff, we'll just give an example of an outdoor store. So if they have pictures in their windows of running shoes or, mountain biking or whatever it might be, we would consider that a display versus a sign. So
But if it says Barry Sports,
Barry's
is that a sign?
That is a sign.
What about the main entrance that has the hours of operation on it? There was something about directional signs. Like I say, I didn't write down that
Directional
section.
directional signs are not, we don't require a permit.
Page 6.
And so because we don't require a permit, we don't regulate that sign.
So is the sign on the door a directional sign or a sign? Directional. Is lettering on a door, I guess, is what I'm asking.
We would consider that an informational sign or a directional sign.
Is it defined in here? And my concern is,
Sure.
you consider that, but in 10 years, will this, if personnel changes, still have the same consideration?
So also included in that, any door signage that's no more than 6 square feet, so about like that, can be installed without a permit. And so typically, anything on the door would be your business name and hours of operation or a telephone number. We don't require permits for that type of information.
Does that control the rest of what amount of signage they may put
No,
other places?
that's not counted in the total allowance.
So is that rule defined?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, other questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
may I just, if I might just make a comment? I know we've gotten hung up on a couple of specific points. All in all, though, I love this sign code rewrite. The way that it enables and gives business owners more signage, the work that you guys have done on this, I really think is excellent. And so I know we've gotten hung up on a couple of the hot button issues, but all in all, I think the work of the book, and I don't want that to be missed, is just how good the rest of the sign code is.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
You know, of all the inputs we received, the one that was most powerful to me came from the Pocatello Advertising Federation. And the concern that they have about Pocatello being hard to do business in. And all the communities that have passed us in population over the last 20 years and where we rank and the number of businesses and retail we have in our community, I can't in good conscience support sign changes. I think if we can't control what we've got now, why do we want to further put additional rules in place that we also can't enforce? I can't support this.
And Rick, if I may, I would just say, in my opinion, we're putting less rules in place in this code than we are in our current code.
I would agree that some things have lessened, but some things have also tightened up. And it's going to be harder for a business to come to Pocatello and do what they want to do, not what we want them to do, but what they want to do. That concerns me.
Sure.
I might just argue a little bit on that one. Because a lot of these regulations are also in every other city. If you sit down and you talk to them, they're also in all these other cities too. It's easy for local people to say, oh, it's so hard to work with the city of Pocatello. I heard that in my entire life in the construction industry. Hardest place in the world to work for and in with and stuff like that. And then when you start reaching out to the Idaho Falls or the Twin Falls or the Boise or the Meridians, the Incomes, the everywhere where else you're going, the regulations are harder here than they are. And you talk to people that are coming in and doing business and they're saying this is the easiest, best place to work. And so I think there's a perception of that we have from locals that it's so difficult and hard to work for the city. And the reality is, I believe it's probably, there's some things that we can fix. I don't disagree, but I believe it's one of the easiest places to work. And I mean, I literally was in, I'll never forget, I'm in at this meeting and this local contractor, a couple of them came up and said, I understand the city made them do this and that, and we're never going to get hotels to come because of all of this stuff, and this is ridiculous. And I said, well, the owner's right there. Let's go talk to him. All right. So we marched over there, and I said, how are you? Curious, did the city make you do this? No. Did the city do this? No. Has the city been difficult to work with? Oh, no. It's the easiest place I've ever worked. And so when he said that, I looked at the others, and they kind of were like, well, yeah, okay, we do have these regulations, that regulation. And so I think there's a perception, and it's easy to say you're hard to work for and work with. And there are some areas I agree. I think our sign code before was probably difficult, but I think it's a pretty good sign code. And I think there's some other areas that we've got to work. If I'm being honest with myself, there's some things, but if everybody's being honest, I think it's a pretty easy city to work with and for and through. We've got staff that has bent over backwards to help different development and different things and work within the code and figure things out. And I don't think we get a fair shake, but I will tell you, Idaho Falls hears the same things from the local people there. Twin Falls hears the same things from the local people there. Everywhere you go, the locals, they find it's easy to work somewhere else. Well, it's just as easy to work at home. They'll burn a bridge or two, or they've done something, and so it's a little bit harder sometimes. And so I think we need to be careful when we say Pocatello is so hard to work with and stuff. I don't think that that's necessarily the case, but I hear it. I want you to know I've heard it. I continue to hear it occasionally, but when you really get digging down, I don't think that the city's is so difficult that that's stopping progression and development and stuff. Anyway, you had.
And I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. I know some contractors who are looking at doing some business here, and they've made exactly those comments to me. They're from out of town. They don't think Pocatello is hard to do business in. In fact, most of them agree it's pretty easy. I guess my concern is about making these changes is we've got a sign code we aren't enforcing now. We can't. So the complaints we're getting, we really aren't doing anything about them, and this won't fix those. If we're continue to be complaint-driven and don't have the ability to take care of those complaints, why are we trying to do what we're doing? That's the part that I just disagree with. I think if we stepped up, I don't know how. I don't know whose responsibility this becomes, whether it's code enforcement or maybe it's the council's responsibility to go watch these signs in different parts of town. I don't know. We did that a couple of years ago. We were looking at improvements. We divvied up the community among the council, and they all came back with what we thought needed to be done. But we're about to take action that won't have any more enforceability than what we have now. And that's my huge concern. I think the local complaints would go away if we enforce the current code.
Well, I think that, that's a valid, very, very valid point. And so we have started to address that because of this. We're starting to address it. We did have, I'll just throw this out. I think everybody knows, we did have 2 code enforcements. We now have 7. We're asking the departments and everybody that's out there, if you see it, say something so that we can try to get ahead of it. That's a cultural change of the city that we're trying to change. You're right, code enforcement is a pain for everything, and it's not just signs. It's sidewalks, it's trees overhanging, it's weeds, it's abandoned cars, and it's a timely process, and I think that Josh brought up a good point. We have to narrow that time down to I mean, literally, if I don't want to cut my weeds in my yard, I don't have to, because they'll grow. I'll wait for a few weeks. My neighbors will complain. I'll get a letter. I'll wait for another couple weeks. I'll get another letter. And by the time we go through all of this process, the snow will be back and they'll be down. And so we have to kind of narrow that down, and that's kind of a policy thing. So I think when you get a code in here, then I think we get the policies and we do it. I agree 100%. It's enforcement. Let's see, I've got Council Member Mansfield, Lyric, and Nichols.
I want to say, though, I agree with Rick on the enforcement point, but that's the reason to me why this sign code is so important, is because, number one, when you are inundated with what would be sign code violations, there becomes problems in terms of like picking which ones you're going to enforce. You can't only enforce one part of the sign code. But if you look at our current sign code and the patchwork that's been built around it, is my understanding. So please cut me off if I'm wrong. But from my understanding, we have so many like definitions of like what types of signage, how much it can be, that are delineated and broken out, that making sure every business is compliant right now is just a monumental task. This takes all those patchworks, combines them into a single pot, and says, this is how much signage you're allocated. Do with it what you will. And by doing so, we reduce a lot of the like very specific restrictions around sign code, making it easier for businesses to get sign permits, reducing our actual code enforcement or code violations that exist, and allowing us to streamline then where we're prioritizing code enforcement. Am I right so far on that?
I'd agree with you.
So I understand the idea of like, well, if we're not enforcing how it is now, then why would we change it? I think it's because our current code is very difficult to enforce. And a lot of these things become addressed. Not all of them, but a lot of them get addressed. And then I would be interested in seeing a work session agenda item that is about code enforcement, where we talk about our code enforcement policy on a general scale so that we can kind of identify some of those other areas and begin to enforce what I think is a much better sign code written all around for businesses and the city.
Okay. Council President Lyric.
I agree with what Josh just said. But I will add that one of the reasons I think it's going to be easier to enforce is because it is, you've already said how we've simplified it. The current code is so complicated that that's a lot of what makes it difficult to enforce. So we're simplifying it and that will help. But the other thing we're doing here in this code, or you have done, is to provide more options for business owners. And I think having more options for their signage and having it be less restrictive will eliminate a lot of the complaints and lessen the need for enforcement. So I think when you put those together, when you simplify the code and make it a lot more user-friendly and readable and understandable, but also provide more options for people, there's only one specific type of thing that is really being limited here. And I think there are reasons for that. But overall, it's a lot less restrictive. And therefore, I think that will ease enforcement. And to me, that is one of the main reasons to do a new code is, to accomplish those things, is to provide more options to business owners, so that making it easier for them to do business in our community, and also simplifying it so that they know what the code says and what they're supposed to do. I think many people out there right now have no idea what they're supposed to be doing. They leave it up to the sign companies, and some of the sign companies, and maybe it depends on which employee you work with at which sign company, and some of them have kind of learned the codes and others have not. And so it's very it's a mixed bag at the moment, in terms of what you get and whether it's done correctly or not. So I think changing this code, and I also commend you on the hard work that you've done and put into this. I especially like all the feedback that you got and working with different stakeholders, and that includes the public, not just the sign companies. I know often they're, the louder voice in the room, but just the general public has a stake in this. And I think you've talked to everybody and taken into consideration what they wanted and tried to come up with the best balance of that, but also the most straightforward, simple statement of that. So I think this is a really good effort, and I commend you on it, and I think it will help us moving forward. Enforcement's always difficult.
I think no
But-
matter what,
yeah,
I think we've got to
it's-
do what Rick's saying, is you got to enforce.
Right.
There does nothing for it.
And we need to. I agree with the idea of, why do we have codes that we don't enforce? That doesn't make sense. So we have to figure out a way to enforce it. But anything we can do with the code and how we write it that makes it easier to enforce, that's a good thing. And so that, to me, suggests we actually need a change, not to leave it as is, because right now, we know it's not enforceable. So I think this is a good move.
Okay, Councilmember Nichols.
Sure. Regarding enforcement, I wanted to throw out a potential concept for dealing with the sort of the repeat EMC brightness violators if they're found to exist, and that would be the potential revocation of a sign permit. I mean, so in addition to, you might not only get a misdemeanor, but you might lose your ability to even operate that sign at all if you keep jacking that thing up over and over again. I don't know if that's legally doable or not, but just wanted to throw it out.
We've got a great attorney, he can defend that easily. There's no.
No, I don't think Jared was asked to come up and say whether or not he can. We're just
Wasn't-
assuming
Here he
that.
comes.
He's about to lower your expectation, I think.
He actually wasn't asked to come up. I don't know what he's doing. I haven't even looked up that way. I just.
We've decided we're just going to stop having you come up and we'll
He's
just,
just going to tell us it depends.
asking forgiveness.
I'm telling you, we've got an incredible attorney. He can defend us, so we don't have to worry about that stuff. He's the best there is, so.
On that note, thank you, Mayor. Jared Johnson, City Attorney. We do have that option in the code as a possible violation remedy. I would consider that our last resort. It's obviously a pretty substantial penalty that would come along with that. But yeah, as long as that's in the code and we have the proper basis for it, which is why I'll make a plug for this because I do think it's a good code. I think this is more enforceable because it's simpler, and especially the illumination stuff. The version that we're working under now has some really complex scientific calculations that are involved. It requires, we talked about it being up in the boom truck or something that makes us perpendicular to the face of the sign. We eliminated all that. We took all that complexity out so that if we end up taking something all the way to misdemeanor prosecution and eventually maybe even a revocation of the permit, we have to have a really good case to be able to take away those rights of those sign owners or that sign company. And we wanted to be able to defend it. And so the simplification, I think, is the best part of coming, that has come out of this. So I'm in favor of that. And yeah, we do have those options, but not something we want to rely on or threaten all the time. It would be in extreme circumstances.
Perfect.
But I would make the argument, Mr. Attorney, that by taking that out, we're making an arbitrary decision. We don't have a defined measurement system as we do now. So I think it's less defensible if we suddenly say you don't meet when we don't have a definition of what that is exactly.
So I think we do have a definition, but what we did is we took it out so that the way that it was before was the best measurement. And that is true. I absolutely agree with that. But the measurement that we would be able to get under this process is a valid measurement. It might just not be the best measurement. In this case, that means that the best measurement would be brighter than the measurement that we receive. So if we do a simplified measurement process and it still reads 0.3 over ambient lighting, we know that directly and raised and perpendicular and the right distance is probably brighter than that. So if we're getting a measurement that exceeds our standard from any angle, well, I shouldn't say any angle, but from appropriate angles, which is how we have it listed, then that's defensible in court, and we don't have to get caught up in the weeds of were you exactly perpendicular? If the center of the sign is 40 feet off the ground, were you 40 feet up in the bucket? All those types of details we don't have to deal with anymore. We just have a reading that tells us that at that reading that's appropriate, and we have a base reading and we have the actual reading, and that actual reading gives us the above ambient light of more than 0.3. Candle light, whatever the foot candle. Yep, learning lots of new terms through this process. Then that is out of compliance, and that's enough for us to move forward. We discuss this a lot in my office with Jennifer. Most of these probably will not end up in front of a jury and a judge, but we want to be prepared if it does, and I think this is the better method of going forward if we ever get to that point. I understand your point that, sometimes you think scientific and exact is better, and it probably is. It gets you but I think it results in a higher reading, and that higher reading is not what we have to prove. We just have to prove any reading above 0.3 foot candle over ambient. And we're not gonna move forward on a 0.3001 or whatever.
Well, it says 2 decimals.
Right, but what I'm saying is, if we have a reading that we're kind of down on the ground and at a bit of an angle and it's 0.301 or 0.31, that's barely over. In that case, we might line ourselves up a little more, raise ourselves up a little, and do another reading to see if this really is something that's out of compliance or if it's right on that border.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. See, I told you he could defend it.
Because he's really good.
Well, I'm not going to say he's that good anymore. Council, what do you want to do here? They're looking for direction to bring this to a meeting in the future, or what?
I'd like to move forward with this.
Agreed. Yeah.
We're getting enough yeses to move forward, so if you'd work with legal and prepare this, and we'll move forward.
Mr. Mayor.
Then with it to be taken care of at a council meeting. Yes, sir.
I like a comment that Josh had made about in a later work session, possibly looking at code enforcement, because I think without proper enforcement, this is just
Oh, for
word,
sure.
right? And so either we inject code enforcement into this, or B, we have a work session where we look at code enforcement and we can break it into that work session.
We'll keep code enforcement as a policy so that it can be fluid enough to do that. We don't want to put that in code so that we can do some stuff, but we'll definitely work on the code enforcement and get things worked out there and see if we need to come to a session, a work session, we'll do that in the future. That will cover more than sign, by the way.
Right,
That'll cover all
That's
that.
what I want.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why, I guess I need further explanation. Why would we not want to codify code enforcement in this instance?
So, Mr. Attorney, that's so good and all that stuff, would you please come back on up here? Explain to us why we wouldn't want to codify the code enforcement into this. See how good he is? He jumped right up and came up.
And you asked me
Super
to
good.
this time, yeah.
That's right.
I agree with the mayor. I don't think you want to put that directly into the code because then you're stuck with that process and you don't have the flexibility in different situations, different, I don't want to say justifications for non-compliance, but sometimes there are justifications. And so we can adapt to what is being presented to us as far as the complaints. Some might need to move quicker than the two-letter process that we typically use. Some might need to be slower than that. And if we put it in code and we don't follow that perfectly, that could be a defense against the ordinance violation itself. So I think it's better to just leave that, like any code. We allow our officers to use officer discretion. They don't have to cite, even if there's an offense that's out of compliance, because there might be a more substantial offense that they want to cite for instead or in lieu of. And so I think you just leave code enforcement, the enforcement process, as a discretionary thing for our officers to be able to look at each situation differently.
But to me, that sounds like we're going to be selective and preferential in enforcement of this against some and not others. And I just don't think that's a fair thing to do if we don't have it codified. If we don't say, here's the law, follow the statute, and we won't have a problem. And say some are going to be enforced in 2 weeks and some are going to be enforced in 6 months, if we don't have that regulated and enforced and a definitive process in place.
And I understand that. I would argue that that's actually the case pretty much across the board with not just ordinance enforcement, but laws in general. Officers use their best discretion based on the investigation that's going on, based on other issues that might be at play, that you can't codify everything. And so certainly we wouldn't want discriminatory enforcement or favoritism, and that's nothing we would ever encourage or allow or support as an organization or as a city. But I do think that discretion is important to allow the officers to employ, and if we put it in there, that takes that discretion away. But yeah, there could be differences in enforcement of any code against any person, any individual across the board of all laws, just due to the nature of the specific circumstance. That's unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, I think fortunately that's how it is. I think that's a good thing. I think that there are times we've all been pulled over for speeding and gotten a warning, and I think we're grateful for that we don't have to get the speeding ticket just because we sped every time we speed. And this is kind of similar to that in my opinion.
I've never had a speeding. Been pulled over for speeding, no Rick, so I don't know what he's talking
He's
about.
never gotten a warning. He just
That's true. I've never gotten a warning. Josh?
Well, and a perfect example of that is if you think of, for example, like something that, temporary yard sign that is out of compliance according to our sign code versus a person's sidewalk being out of compliance because of the danger. The difficulty it takes right now to get a contractor to come out and do sidewalk work is very, very difficult. And so we should have the flexibility to say, okay, like, you need to be working on this. We'll come back in a couple months and we're going to come revisit this. But if I come back and I still see this, sign that says Pocatello is bad for business, even though temporary signs aren't allowed right now, that is something that can be pulled today and needs to be pulled. And so I think that flexibility just in that example of the different codes that we are enforcing is just a critical element, to cutting weeds, mowing your grass versus replacing a sidewalk. Critical example there of how I would prefer some discretion to be allowed.
Well, and even cutting weeds, quite frankly, and mowing lawns and stuff, you have somebody that's a 98-year-old
Great point.
widow that can't get out
Great
and do
point,
that.
yeah.
And so I think there needs to be some flexibility too. And so I think bring this forward and then we'll just go from there. Work to bring it to a council meeting in the future and then we'll go from there. So,
Thank you.
okay, thank you. Okay, then we will move to agenda item 8 is council advisory board updates. And I've got a question that from Council President Lurick. She would like to go first. She's going to have to leave. And so I've also asked Merrill to come back in, and I think he'll be coming back in just a few minutes to talk a little bit. And if you want to mention BTPO, the changes and stuff that that were supported last week on the, I'm just going to say functional classifications and stuff, if you remember that.
Yeah, I was trying to remember.
I got
the
two of you over
details.
there
Yeah.
where we've got the different units have to recognize the changes in the,
That was the amendment to the tip.
yes, and Merrill's running, he's here, see.
Okay.
So when you're reporting, if you would mention that, and Merrill's more than willing and
Maybe
able
Merrill
to talk a
can
little bit
explain
about
it.
it. Yeah, explain it to us a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes, go ahead.
yeah.
Sorry.
So I'll
So-
start with BTPO.
I seen it was done,
then.
so I started running.
Yeah, thanks, Meryl. So we had our meeting this past Monday, and two things that were on the agenda were, what do they call them? NOFOs. So it's a notice of funding opportunities. And there are two that have different, like, size classifications and different qualifications. And we approved putting out those notices, and that means the city of Pocatello, the city of Chubbuck, the county, or ITD can propose a project, and we'll just decide which is the top priority for those two different sources of funding that became available. But the other thing we talked about was an amendment to the TIP, which stands for Transportation Something I Plan. Improvement Plan, that's right, thank you. And so Merrill is gonna tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, so through the MPO, through Maury's group, Merrill Coyle, City of Pocatello.
Thank you.
And through Maury's group, BTPO, we have to have stuff, projects put on these lists, and it has to be approved and goes through the TAP Advisory Committee and then the board, the policy board, which is made up of the councils and mayors and that's on that policy board for the MPO. Once those projects go on there and are slated for a project, then the MPOs throughout the state and through, when the money comes in through ITD, they manage that money and can start slating that money to go towards different projects. And that's what's taken place now. So in our last technical advisory committee meeting with the MPO that I sit on also, Jeff Mansfield, Tom Kirkman, Mike Neville, and the other agencies, we're tasked to come up with some of the projects that we think is important to start putting that on that list, on the tip, so that we can start looking for those fundings and opportunities, and Maury can start helping us also through that policy and that project. So did that explain it enough, or any other things that's needed?
I think that's good. Does anybody need any more clarification? Okay.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you, Merrill.
Okay.
Thanks for rushing to Council President's
Aid.
rescue.
Aid.
Aid.
With that, Mayor, if I could, we did get one from Maury with the, and you will see this, we're hoping in the next council meeting on the 7th, I believe. One of those changes also to the functional class for roadways. And there's a small list of those and the changing that goes along with this tip and how to be able to follow that. So that's what it is. It's the classifications. We're changing, a quick example of one, for instance, is we're changing Northgate Parkway from a minor arterial to a principal arterial, meaning, you know, it carries more traffic and the speeds and so forth. Another one would be East Alameda. When you see that one, East Alameda is the one that's by Tendoy School. It's not the actual thoroughfare of Alameda. It's that short leg of Alameda, changing it from a collector to a local street because it just carries local. So you will see that coming, but I told Maury and Jeff, and the mayor has allowed me to just introduce that, and you'll see that in a resolution form so that, and through ITD's policies and processes, it has to be in a kind of a resolution.
Let me ask a question about that. Is that going to affect speed limits? Is that going to affect funding? What effect?
No,
will that
it doesn't really affect anything. It just, again, puts it on that list and how we can apply for the grants and so forth. It won't affect maintenance. The road is what it is, and we've already set the speed limits that's there and by ordinance, and if those need to be changed, then we speak with Mike Nabil and we start that through that process, and myself and legal, so that we can get that changed in the ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
So actually, that is my main report because,
Glad you were prepared for that.
yeah, the Audit and Investment Committee, we meet quarterly, and so our next meeting is a little bit later in October, so we have not met. And then the PDA, we are meeting next week, I believe, and so I don't really have anything new.
Okay.
We'll see what happens at that meeting. And then my last one is the historic downtown Pocatello, and I was in Virginia when they met last week, I think it was. Anyway, they met recently, but I was out of town. But they had a very successful summer. There was a lot of reporting on that and all the different events and dealing with the underpass being closed. They still had a very successful summer and things were good. Several business owners are very pleased that the underpass is open again, but knowing that it will be closed again at some point when we finish that project. But I think despite that, everybody worked hard and they had a plan to kind of overcome it, and things went well this summer. We also are, or they, I should say, are already planning some really interesting things for the holidays. And the Nightlights Parade is planned, and there's some secrets that I can't tell you that are planned for that event. So
Don't make friends.
be sure to be there because it's going to be a lot of fun. What'd you say?
Secrets don't make friends.
I know.
You've got the cat out of the bag now. You're going to have to say something to somebody. Everybody in Pocatello wants to know what that secret is now. So you've
that
messed
is
that
to
up.
get them to come to the event, and then they will find out what the secret is.
I'm
Yeah.
watching for those minutes, Shawnee.
So it should be good.
That's right.
Redact.
That's right.
Last thing I'll say real quickly is, there's big black marks. That there have been a few buildings and properties that have sold and sales that have gone through and new things that are coming. So keep your eyes on downtown because we'll be getting some new businesses coming soon. So that would be, the big thing with PDA we did do in the last meeting, didn't we? With Mona?
Nope.
No, okay,
I haven't done anything with that.
okay,
With,
then I have nothing more.
see.
More
He
secrets.
is a poor secret keeper.
More secrets, huh?
No, I don't think we've done anything with that, so.
Okay, Hey, I didn't say it.
How proud she is. She screwed it up, but she's proud she didn't say it out loud. Rick?
Well, I can add to something Len was talking about downtown. I talked to Stephanie the other day, ran into her, and we were chatting, and they're gonna end up with a net 12 businesses downtown this year.
Yeah.
They've had some close, as small business often does, but business is really up, despite the center underpass closing.
Right.
They've had a very good year downtown. But she covered BTPO pretty well. I won't go into that. Airport, we didn't have a meeting this month, but I know that based on the numbers that I've seen and the fire season we've had, our fuel flow is up dramatically over what it was last year. Not as good as it was 3 years ago when we had a terrible fire season, but that enhances income at the airport quite well. And make sure everybody's aware that FAA Tower, we talked about the last meeting, is coming, and that's going to be a great enhancement for our airport and usage of general aviation and commercial aviation at that airport in the future. And to me, that's a signal that the FAA considers this airport continue to be important to Southeast Idaho. Senior Center had a meeting yesterday. They asked me to express their thank you for the sidewalks that we did on the west side of the building out there. If you drive by there, you'll see a lot of construction going on over in the corner at the Bonneville Community Park. The Bonneville Community Neighborhood has solicited almost $50,000 in donations to improve that. They're putting in bocce ball, they're putting in new playground equipment. One of the points that was made is they put in a table and a bench, and it cost $10,000, which seems like a lot for a small improvement, but it's an ADA thing, and it's going to be a considerable improvement. Construction is underway. They hope to have it done here in the next few weeks before winter season gets here. So that'll all be ready to go and will be a good improvement for that neighborhood. The building is in better shape than it's been in years. The sidewalk, she said, the board members at that last brainstorm we had, a month, 6 weeks ago, were all outside in the rain, photographing the water running into the street instead of into the building.
They're all worried about getting wet before. Then they were excited about getting wet so they could take pictures that are flowing the right way.
So that's been a good
Of their
improvement to
ability
the
to not get
building.
wet.
We do apparently need to talk to the Labor Department building, and I'm gonna go talk to Candy about it, about the steps that are there. There's a stumbled hazard problem that actually is on the state property, not on the city property. So I'll talk to Candy about that and get it talked about. But this month, the financial report, the senior center made about $1,700 net in the month of September, which is a turnaround improvement. But that is there because they had a very successful car show, they had a very successful golf tournament, and they had 3 grants that were far more, the income generated was far more than what that $1,700 was. So in the real bottom line, they continue to struggle financially. Anita is no longer at the senior center as the executive director. She's moved to Cottonwood Cove to manage that facility. And the new director is Tara Contreras, who many of you probably know Tara. So she is taking over as executive director of the senior center. And the board can, I've known Tara a long time. We used to work together 17 or 18 years ago. And I have every confidence she will do an excellent job in continuing the rebuild of the senior center that's been undergoing the last few years. End of report.
Super. Thank you. Brent?
Sure. I don't have much to report. 2 of my committees, the Audit and Investment Committee and the Animal Shelter, both meet quarterly and haven't met this month. And the Human Relations Advisory Committee, they did meet, but I missed that meeting, so I don't have anything really.
So could you take back to the Animal Shelter Board something? I visited with Ian Fennell yesterday, and he would be very interested in helping the Animal Shelter Board when we get overflow of animals and they're trying to get them adopted to be able to run a story. And he says there's a lack of communication. They've reached out to do some of those things, but they would like to be able to be a part of that and help with that. So if you would, at the next one,
You bet.
mention something like that, that'd be awesome.
I'll be happy to.
So, all right.
All right. Sika finished their annual audit. Took a while because I guess the accounting firm had a lot of people quit. Yeah, they have $976,000 for down payment assistance, and there's 48 applicants right now. So Sika's trying to figure out a wait list policy essentially, because not all those people will be able to get that. Then I had childcare. Over the last few weeks, some centers and parents wrote letters that they have sent to Department of Health and Welfare in Boise about the ICCP pause. 2 centers have closed in the last 2 months here. There's a pertussis outbreak in Ada, but we haven't seen it here yet. COVID's up, and they want to start doing some sort of trainings, whether it's food safety, maybe a vaccination session, or unfortunately, active shooter training, specifically for childcare centers. CDBG is on Tuesday, so I'll tell you guys next time. And then Parks and Rec, we had a beaver presentation about the beaver dams. They're actually really important and cool. On Sunday, if anyone wants to go, 5 p.m. meeting at Indian Hills to go do a beaver pond survey, see how many are there or if there are any there. And yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. I know we're doing a lot of work with childcare. That ICCP pause has definitely created an issue and a concern, so thank you for that and staying on top of that. That's good.
So NeighborWorks Pocatello, they're trekking along like normal. Everything's good there. Nothing really to update or report about. The Housing Alliance Community Partnerships, we just heard from them. But I do want to say, Jared, since coming in as the executive director, it's been a drastic turnaround for their organization, and they're doing a lot of good in our community. And the Golf Advisory Committee, golf is winding down. I believe what we talked about closing, golf courses will close in November. It's kind of been weird because of the weather that we've had recently, because it's staying warm for so long. But they really want that clubhouse. That's their biggest drive right now, is they really want that clubhouse. And so looking at some possible partnerships or something to get that going. But other than that, golf is up, especially in our community. And nationally, golf is just up. And so there's a lot of benefit to us having these golf courses here. But
I might just add, though, we are working on that, the clubhouse. We do have what I think would be a really good partner that we're working with to see if we can get that. The city's got some money that we're gonna put at it as well, and so I think that we'll be able to see if we can get this partnership done. I think we'll be able to see a really nice golf clubhouse start, hopefully in the spring, but we'll see.
Also,
Have there been any architectural renderings yet of expectation?
Not yet, because we're not 100% sure what kind of funding we have. And so it will differ drastically if it's only what the city has, then it would definitely be different than if we have a good, solid company that's willing to make an investment there.
also, state is coming up for golf, and it'll be here at our courses.
State golf will be here. Nice. Good. When is that? Yeah.
Don't ask.
Don't ask. It's coming up.
It's a secret.
They probably want volunteers too.
Linda's got all kinds of secrets, and so does Corey, apparently.
They could use some volunteers for scorekeeping and whatnot. I'll look up the dates.
All right, while you're doing that, we're gonna move to Josh.
We had the Arts Committee here today. I didn't send out, I failed to send out, and I will make sure I rectify that today, the information for the revolving loan fund for CCOG. Today I wanted to do just a quick mention, Area Agency on Aging. We are Area 5. which covers a couple counties around here, Caribou, Bingham, Bannock, Power County, all are included in our area. One of the great benefits, there's tons of resources. Mike Hershey is an amazing resource. He's the one who runs that. But one of the best resources, in my opinion, is the caregiver burnout prevention programs that they have. And that's not just full-time caregivers. If you have a loved one that a parent or a grandparent that you help take care of, they have resources for you that can help you with that, and education and opportunities there. I will send out all that contact to council today for all three of the departments there at CCOG, so you have contacts with each of those individuals. I'm going to drift out of my lane for just a second on my last two comments I wanted to make. Number one, I've used the pickleball courts out at Ross Park about half a dozen times in the past couple of weeks. It is just an incredible facility, and it is always packed. I mean, we are always waiting for courts to use them, and they're incredibly popular. And I'm talking 9:30 at night when we're playing just with the lights, because it's dark and it's still just full of people, especially on the weekends. So it's been a great addition. The other comment I wanted to make was about downtown Pocatello. I attended, I think it was at the homecoming game for ISU. There was some people sitting behind me, and one of the couples were residents, and the other ones used to live in Pocatello but now live in Boise, I think is what they said. And they drove down to come stay and participate in the game. And they were talking about just how amazing all of the different things that they had to do before and after the game, the restaurants. They said, we've spent more time downtown in the past weekend than we did when we lived in Pocatello, and we were just so impressed being down here. They talked about Lookout Park, how nice that was. I guess they went and had lunch and ate at the park. I listened in way more than I should have, because I was just so excited hearing this couple that used to live here and hasn't, and they said 20 years, and just how great it's been. I probably should have turned around and told them that I was listening, but no identifying information here. It was incredible to hear an outsider perspective of what Pocatello is doing. So
Good deal. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I just have the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council, and we've just started. We're moving on. We did have our first trail cleanup this year. We actually we cleaned a trail up from Center Street. Where's Marlies isn't in here? From the top of Center Street, where the trailhead is, up about a mile, and then back down over a hillside. And we found some great things. We found a big tire. I don't know who loses a tire, but it was a tire off of a rim. It was just the tire that we had some kids that thought they could push it up and around the whole mile. And a little while later, we stopped a pickup truck and asked them if they could take it to the bottom of the hill for us. And they did, which was really neat. So, but they're doing good things. We've got our little food pantry out here. We've got 2 of them, and it's amazing how much of the community. There are times we'll go out there thinking it's empty, and somebody in the community has filled it for us. And then we have our little pantry, if you will, back here that we fill it with from donations and stuff. So just the things and the way that those are getting used it's amazing. I never would have guessed it, quite frankly. But our youth they're great. We've got a really good youth population in our community, and they're doing good things. So yes.
Speaking of food, how's the gravy drive, part of the mayor and council going?
Do you know what? I don't know how the gravy drive's going. I think that we've got everybody in the city doing it. And we've asked everybody, all the departments to participate. So I don't know. I just know that I went and pulled a couple boxes of gravy off the thing and took them.
That's what I did.
And I thought it was easier than trying to count out whatever I wanted. I just grab a couple boxes. And it closes when? Does that close?
Friday at noon,
So tomorrow's the last day.
and we will count at that time how many we've received.
So I think our goal is the 1,200 packs of gravy. And so this is a challenge to all of the departments out there, and I'm looking at you, Jim. And legal, you and legal are the only ones left in here for us. We want to hit that goal of 1,200 packs. I think we will. I think we're going to exceed that goal of 1,200 packs of gravy. So pretty exciting. But good question.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
State golf is this weekend.
State golf is this
Yeah,
weekend.
this weekend.
Thanks for the notice, so we can prepare for it.
The 11th and 12th.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you very much. Thanks for attending and for being here. Council, thank you for your work. With that, we are adjourned.
Thanks, sir.